We continue on our path to a new primer, looking at creating a lesson for lessons 1 to 32. And we're going to be looking, that last video we looked at select the new letters to be introduced, so choosing which letter is going to go with which lesson. And now we're going to be looking at finding or selecting the two picture words using the new letters as step 2 in creating a lesson. You can find this on pages 45 and 47 of your manual if you want to follow along in that. It's good to remember that adults learn by association and repetition. So adults have a large data bank of knowledge that they bring with them to the learning process. And so it's a matter of helping them to associate what they already know with a new element. So the picture words help the adults relate a familiar object in their world with the written form of that object. For example, tree. We have the picture of the tree and then the written form of tree. And so this helps the new reader to associate, oh, I know this, so now I know that this means this object. We're going to choose two picture words made from our available letters using common nouns. And so we're going to use the language data worksheet. We have those lists of common nouns we had the team fill out ahead of time. Your language team members can be filling out other lists, or they may think of words that weren't on the other list that they could use. They can use a small dictionary or other sources, maybe an old set of primers that have picture words or other words that are simple words that might be handy. Yeah, and the smaller dictionaries are handier because they do not have so much data in them. They're the more basic words, which is what we want to use in our primers. So you want to select picture words that contain the new letter or cluster, plus any letters taught in earlier lessons. Now, keeping in mind lesson 1, everything will be new, and we're going to limit ourselves to those first 5 letters, top letters. But then in subsequent lessons, you're going to have 1 or 2 new letters or clusters. And so you want your picture words to include that letter plus any of the old letters that have come before. You want to select words that are common objects, things that are in their everyday life, not some esoteric word that may somehow be in the language. You want to select nouns only, no verbs. And the reason for this is because a noun is usually the same, looks the same in its basic form, like tree, looks like tree. But when you use it in the story, but a verb, the infinitive of a verb will often look quite different in a story depending on, the tense or the person, male or female, or singular or plural. And so they don't look the same when they're used in the story. So select nouns that will be used in the same way in the story. You want to select words that contain the new letters, preferably at the beginning of the word or as a stressed syllable, not kind of buried in the middle, if at all possible. And this just helps the new reader to see the letter and learn the letter. Do not select words that contain letters that have not been introduced in the current or previous lessons. And it's so, so important to really try and keep this accurate, because if you pick a word for a picture word that ends up has a wrong letter in it, and you don't actually introduce one of those letters until 3 or 4 lessons later, it's very hard to go back then and rework that lesson. So just really keep on top of not having stowaway letters, we'll call them. You want to select words that can only be associated with one picture. So for example, in English, the word bow. You have this bow, like for a bow and arrow. You have this bow that you wrap on a present. Same word, same pronunciation, but 2 different meanings. So just to avoid confusion, we want to try and not use a word that can be associated with more than one picture. And then just to complicate things, in English, that same spelling, B-O-W, can also be pronounced bow. someone who bows. And so for those particular reasons, you wouldn't want to use that as a picture word. You could for sure use it in the story, but not as a picture word. We also want to try not to use pictures of people until book 2, if at all. It doesn't mean you don't have people in your pictures, but for instance, if you just have this picture here, you might be able to say woman, but if you call her Mary, and then 2 lessons later you have another picture of another woman and name her Josephine, then all of a sudden it's getting confusing to remember who's who. Now you can use names, and you can use certainly relational words of like uncle, aunt, mother, father, all those kinds of things in the lessons. But be very careful about using them as picture words. You want to select words that can be easily pictured. So for instance, chair. You may have different styles of chairs in the culture, different things, but they see a chair that they're familiar with in a picture, and they're going to know that's the word chair. Same with a boat. The style of boats may differ, but the basic word for boat is going to be the same. And the same for snake. You have the snake picture. But how about the word water? Now, on the surface, it looks like that would be a very good picture word. It's a common word in the culture. It's used by everybody. The word for water would only be used for that word. But then we get into picturing water. How would you picture water? Say, well, you just have water coming out of a tap. Well, is it a tap or is it water? Well, okay, we'll have a well. Well, is it a well or is it water? Or how about just a pond? Well, is it a pond or is it water? You see the problem. So water, excellent word. You certainly want to use it in the stories, but not the best picture word. Can cause some confusion. The other thing you want to watch for, particularly in the earlier lessons, is the footprint of the word. And for instance, here we have 2 words that we saw in our Lingala lesson, bana and balabala. You can see here the different footprints of the word. Bana has this one hump here and then kind of just basic stuff here, where balabala has all these humps. Plus it's a lot longer. So it looks very, very different from bana. So this particularly comes in handy for step 2 of teaching the lesson when they find the picture words everywhere in the lesson. That makes it very easy for the new reader. Also, when it comes to reading the sentences, oftentimes you would think bala bala would be the hardest word, but for many new readers, particularly in the early lessons, it's the easiest word because it's the only long word. And so it helps the new readers to get started in reading because they're not reading by letter or syllable at this point. Compare that to these 2 words, kena, kene. And so you can see the footprint is basically is the same. The only difference is this end letter. This makes it very, very hard for the new reader if you use these kind of picture words in early lessons. So it makes it a little harder on the writers, especially if they have these are 2 really good pictures and words that go with the pictures that fit within the letter thing. But if the footprint doesn't work, then save one for another lesson, but pick a different word to go in that lesson. So that's how we choose picture words for the lesson. And so now you're going to have an exercise where you're going to do that. And you can find this as a PDF on a link PDF on in your lesson. And so basically you're going to be choosing 2 picture words from this list of words from the Quechua language in Ecuador. And you can see here we have our top 7 letters plus the 8th letter in our frequency count. And for lesson 1, we're only going to be choosing the top a maximum of 5 letters for our picture words. So a maximum of 5 letters. And so you're going to go through here and find what you think would make 2 good picture words for lesson 1 based on the criteria we've just gone over. Remember, you can use your manual to remind you of those criteria. Couple of cultural things that might be interesting for you to know. One is that potato is one of the staple foods in Quechua culture, and also that non-Christians in the Quechua culture often worship the sun god. So with those things in mind, we'll let you get to it and let you pick out some picture words.